Israel stood at Sinai. We read that in the Torah passage this morning. For some reason, that struck me this week as I was reading Parashat Yitro. Here's where it's stated. It's the hook that got me. Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They stood near the base of the mountain. Picture about 2 million people standing. That's an incredible scene, standing. There are other passages that talk about standing in the Bible. And when I read this one, it tickled my mind. What about other passages? These passages come to mind. All of us will stand before God's judgment seat. And in Genesis, in Bereshit, when Abraham is visited by the 3 travelers, the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before Adonai. Those are just a couple of the passages that occurred to me. And I began to say, why don't I speak this week about standing before Adonai? What different kinds of standing do we find in the Bible? That's the question that occurred to me that gave birth to this drash. My point today will be to propose to you that our spirituality will be stronger and better structured if we implement what the Bible says about standing. That's my point. What's the point of what I'm going to be talking about? My proposal that our spirituality will be stronger and better structured if we implement what the Bible says about standing. And I make a promise to you today. Through examining passages on standing, this drash will give you a better grasp on your identity, on your authority, and your accountability as a Yeshua believer. All of that is wrapped up in the metaphor of standing. So let's proceed. This kind of a drash has a special Jewish resonance for me. There's a phrase that is often placed above the ark in many synagogues, and it's a pregnant phrase from Jewish life, and it's so powerful. Know before whom you stand. In other words, you need to be aware of who God is. And in a synagogue, it's put there because people gather to pray, and very often they get together to chatter and do all kind of mishmash. But there's a reminder up there in the front. Remember who you're here to meet with. Know before whom you stand. All of us could spend a lifetime meditating on that phrase, that sentence, and implementing in our lives. Another reason this subject has Jewish relevance is the Amidah. Although we don't stand, unfortunately, it's wrong, I want to say, that during the Amidah, we should be standing. But if we stand, we're going to be looking at each other's belly buttons during that section of the service because the camera is focused on us seating. But we're supposed to stand during the Amidah because we're in the presence of God. And and I'll say more about that as we go along. And then another thing that is powerful, it's from the Torah about standing. It says, stand up in the presence of a person with gray hair. Show respect for the old. And then look what it says. You are to fear your God. I am Adonai. That somehow not showing respect for aged people is something that that demonstrates that we're not fearing God. We're disrespectful to these older people. We're also disrespectful to God. So these are powerful admonitions, and it propels us into today's drash. There are 6 ways the Bible speaks of standing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to show you some verses for this. First, standing as someone's servant, especially of Adonai. Standing. Eliyahu, Elijah, and Elisha Elisha, sometimes pronounced, each identify themselves as ones who stand before God. They stand before God as a servant. I think of something mundane like waiters. You don't see waiters sitting down. You only see waiters sitting down when they're after work, when they're off. When waiters are on, they stand. Their role, their job, is to wait on people, and to wait on people, to take care of people, to serve people, is to stand. And when we stand in God's presence, we stand as his servants, ready to say, Hineni, here I am, send me. The second way, and I've picked these ways out of the Bible, there may be more, you can find them, and I can direct you to a whole flock of verses. Secondly, standing connotes being vindicated in a time of judgment. We'll see in a moment this verse from Psalm 1, the wicked shall not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. The wicked will not stand in judgment. It means they will fall. To stand in the time of judgment is to stand as a vindicated person. So standing also connotes being vindicated in a time of judgment. Third, the Bible speaks of standing for something, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Standing is another way of saying, what do you stand for? What do you represent? What do you defend? We'll look at these all again in a moment. 4, standing out of respect. We stand out of respect for the aged, for a person who is a greater or kingly authority, especially God. Supremely, we stand in worship. I was going to show you a video, and probably I should have hunted it up. There was a famous moment in the Congress of the United States when Mother Teresa, who was about 4'9", old and stooped over, when Mother Teresa came to speak to the Congress, there was a moment that is very powerful. Look it up on YouTube. When she walked into the room, everybody stood up. Powerful. Why did they stand? They were standing in the presence of somebody they knew they should respect. This is a woman worthy of honor. And they all stood up instinctively. It's powerful. And when we don't show respect to those who deserve respect, we're proving ourselves to be common and cheap and not very respectable, because we're not very respectful. The 5th way is standing to intercede with an earthly king or with a divine king about your needs or those of others. We saw that with Abraham. He remained standing before Adonai as he interceded for the people of Sodom. We have a lawyer in our midst. David is a lawyer, and he does a lot of standing in court. You stand before the bar. You stand before the court. It's out of respect. You got to watch out how you dress. You got to watch out how you speak. You got to watch out about your body posture. You stand when you address the court. You don't do it from your seat. And standing is a way of posturing ourselves in addressing a king or the divine king. And finally, people not only stand for something, as we see up here, but people in the Bible are also asked to stand against something. So let's look a little more at that. I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to go find a page on that I prepared of some texts just to beef this up. So just one moment. Oh, please. Shah. So here we are. Okay. Just a second, I gotta turn something off. That's good. All right, so here we are, standing as someone's servant, especially Adonai. Let's have a couple of you read. Erica, would you read these bullet points?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Standing as someone's servant, especially of Adonai. In 1 Kings 17, verse 1, Eliyahu from Tishbe, an inhabitant of Gilad, said to Achav, "As Adonai, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there will be neither rain nor dew in the years ahead, unless I say so."
And then we come to Elisha, the next one, 2 Kings.
Elisha said, "As Adonai Tzvaot lives, before whom I stand, if I didn't respect the fact that Yehoshaphat, the king of Yehuda, is here, I wouldn't even look in your direction or take notice of you."
You know, these prophets had guts. They talked to kings like this because the king, I don't really stand before you. I'm not here as your servant. I am the servant of Adonai Tzvaot, the Lord of armies. And he's the one before whom I stand. He's the one whom I serve. Okay, Steve Lolly, if you're still among us, would you read for a while, please, here?
I'm here.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Standing connotes being vindicated in a time of judgment. Therefore, the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. Psalms 1:5.
This next one is from Paul addressing the group of elders from Ephesus, and he's giving them final admonitions. And this is part of what he says in Luke chapter 21.
But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man. The Bible speaks of standing for something. Romans 15:1. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand.
Okay, so we stand for something. Let's look at these two. It connotes being vindicated in time of judgment. Well, we've seen that richly. But the Bible speaks about taking a stand on something, standing for something, representing something. And a very serious question that we need to ask ourselves deeply is, what am I known for standing for? What do I stand for? I'll tell you, my stroke, which struck me down, I could have just as easily died. The stroke reminded me of my mortality, of my vulnerability. In a lot of ways, it was extremely spiritually good for me. It was a severe mercy. But we need to ask ourselves, what do I stand for? Now, people will easily say, well, I stand for democracy. I stand for the unborn. It's easy to give a fast answer to that, but deal more deeply with the answer, because we're going to be accountable someday for what we stood for, and we shouldn't just spit out cliches and party platforms. We should know ourselves and know what we stand for. Let's go on. Someone else to read. Patricia, would you read here?
Sure. Standing out for respect.
Of respect.
Out for respect. Standing out of respect for the aged, for one with greater or kingly authority, especially God, and supremely standing in worship. Leviticus 19:32, stand up in the presence of a person with gray hair. Show respect for the old. You are to fear your God. I am Adonai. Daniel 7. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. The stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened.
10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. They stood before him. I think this is speaking of the angelic hosts in worship. In Russian Orthodox churches, there are no benches. There are no seats. People stand for services that go over 2 hours because they see themselves as joining in with heavenly worship. And people are not worshiping sitting down in heaven. Or angels and seraphim and cherubim, nobody's sitting down. In the presence of the king, everybody stands. So that's another way standing is used in the Bible. And Michael David Ramos, would you read this last one, standing to intercede?
Standing to intercede with an earthly king or the divine king about your needs or those of others. Jeremiah 15. Then Adonai said to me, even if Moshe and Shmuel were standing in front of me, my heart would not turn toward this people.
The assumption is that Moshe or Samuel would be interceding for the people. And Adonai says, even if Moshe and Shmuel were standing in front of me, my heart would not go out to these people. So it's a posture of intercession. And here's another one.
Abraham, Genesis 18:22. The men turned away from there and went toward Sidon, but Abraham remained standing before Adonai. Abraham approached and said, will you actually sweep away the righteous with the wicked?
Abraham remained standing before Adonai. Here's the last one. In Ephesians 6, we read, so take up every piece of war equipment God provides so that when the evil day comes, you will be able to resist. Actually, in the other translations, it says stand. You'll be able to stand. When the battle is won, you will still be standing. Therefore, stand. Have the belt of truth buckled around your waist, put on righteousness as the breastplate. So, standing against something. So let's go back to where we were, and we'll take this all home. Just hold on one moment. So there's the 6 things we've been looking at. So there are 4 questions I want to bring you at the conclusion of this consideration. First, on what basis do you hope to be vindicated in the judgment, to stand in the judgment? That's a very serious question for people who are very serious about God, especially when you come to a brush with mortality like I did in my stroke, and Alan was recently very ill. This is not just theological banter. It's a very serious question. What basis do I have for hoping I'll be vindicated in the judgment? And we're quick to give the answer, but we have to really appreciate it. The answer is that in the mercy of God, God sent his only begotten Son to die for sinners. This is unspeakably remarkable. It's unfathomable that the God of the universe would send his beloved to die for sinners. And we hope to be vindicated not only because of his death for us, but because Yeshua is our advocate. He is our defense attorney. He's the one who vouches for us in that day. That is very holy. But as a result, we should live remarkable lives because we have a remarkable hope based on a remarkable love. So that's the first question. Second one, who or what do you stand up for and respect? I'm using this in two senses. First of all, what causes, what values, what virtues do you stand for? And if you really stand for them, you should be known for standing for them. They should be apparent. What do you stand for? And what do you respect? And who do you respect? We should really show respect for people who are worthy of our respect. And we should really not dish out respect for people who are not worthy of our respect. It's a very important thing because it indicates what you stand for. So that's number two, serious questions. Number three, what are you called to stand against? There's some things that all of us are called to stand against. But what are you personally, in terms of your kishkas, in terms of how God has made you, in terms of how you see things, how you resonate with things? What are you called to stand against? If you don't stand against anything, you don't stand for anything either. There should be some things that don't go with me, that don't go with you, that we cannot simply ignore, and that we have to speak up about. These are holy questions. Here's the fourth one. What role does being a representative for the sake of others play in your life? It's interesting in Exodus 18, which was part of our reading today, Jethro, in speaking to Moshe and explaining to him a different way to handle all the disputes and the problems of the people of Israel, he says that you'll have other men, other people handling most of the disputes, but the ones that they can't, they will bring to you, and you will represent these causes to God. That's what intercession is. When you intercede, you go into the presence of God as a representative of someone else. I'm here on behalf of Patricia. I'm here on behalf of my friend M. Hurley, who just got out of the hospital yesterday. You're the representative. You're a shaliach. You're sent to represent them. What role does being a representative for the sake of others play in your life? In two respects. Do you speak up for the needy in the civil world? I'll ask a very loaded question. Do we really care about the poor? Do we really care about people who don't get justice in the courts and in other ways? Do we really care? Do we speak up on their behalf, or do we just keep our mouth shut and say, gee, that's really terrible? Will we do nothing? The Torah doesn't let us get away with that. God is not impressed with a righteousness that doesn't take action. So, who do you speak up for in the public world, in the civic world? And who do you represent in your prayers? Do you intercede for people? These are four serious questions. They're deep questions, and they come out of our text today. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart and of all of our hearts prove to be acceptable in the sight of God. And may He water the word which has been sown in our hearts for His own pleasure. I proposed today that our spirituality would be stronger and better structured if we would implement what the Bible says about standing. I hope I did that. And what I did deliver today is what is on the promise I made to you at the beginning of this drash. Through examining passages on standing, this drash gave us a better grasp on our identity, our authority, and our accountability as Yeshua believers. Shabbat Shalom.